So welcome, Sanjeev.
Thank you, Dr. Cleverly, and it's a pleasure to be here to be moderating this session today with this group of speakers, and a pleasure to welcome all of you to our seminar series. Today's session will include presentations from Violetta Seleznova, Dr. Irina Pinchuk, and Dr. Volodymyr Virchenko, who will be discussing the topic of mental health of university students during and after the war, Battle for Ukrainian Future. In this session, our presenters will cover a range of topics predominantly focused on generating and disseminating knowledge about traumatic events, including the signs and symptoms of mental disorders among university students during the war in Ukraine. They'll also talk about strategies for effective prevention, screening for mental disorders, and employing advanced forms of intervention among university students during and after the war. And lastly, they'll cover how to facilitate international partnerships between researchers in the area of student mental health protection. Following their presentations, we will host a Q&A, and there is a Q&A function that is different from the chat. So I ask that you take a look at the bottom bar of your screen, as that's where, if you do have questions that come up at any point during the session, please enter them in the Q&A function, and they'll be directly sent to myself and the speakers. So it's my pleasure to introduce more formally our presenters. Violetta Seleznova is a PhD student in economics at Taras Shevchenko National University in Kyiv. She's currently working on her interdisciplinary doctoral research involving comprehensive analysis of the impact of psychological factors and mental health status on consumer behavior. Violetta is participating in transdisciplinary research on an innovative model of mental health protection of students during and after the war. Violetta's research is at the intersection of economy and psychiatry, and looking forward to hearing more about Violetta's work in this presentation. We also have Dr. Irina Pinchuk, who is a professor and the director of the Institute of Psychiatry at Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. She's the president of the Ukrainian Psychiatric Association, country director of the International Technology Transfer Center in the Ukraine, and head of the Ukraine National Chapter of International Society of Substance Use Professionals. She's also a member of the board of directors of the International Consortium of Universities for Drug Demand Reduction. The Lancet Psychiatry has invited Dr. Pinchuk to lead a commission on mental health and research in Ukraine with a focus on the future vision of psychiatry and mental health. Dr. Pinchuk has extensive experience in preparing policy recommendations for the Ministry of Health of Ukraine and the National Health Service of Ukraine. So thank you, Dr. Pinchuk, for being here as well. And then last but not least, Volodymyr Virchenko is the director of the Interdisciplinary Analytical Center of Socioeconomic Wellbeing and Mental Health of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. Dr. Virchenko is a co-chair of the Research Group and Economic Group of the Lancet Psychiatry Commission on Mental Health and Research in Ukraine. In 2020 to 2024, he participated in he took part in 11 national surveys and analytical studies on mental health and socioeconomic well-being of vulnerable populations. And he has extensive experience in preparing public policy recommendation for the Ministry of Education and Science of Ukraine and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. So delighted to have all three of you here presenting, and we look forward to your presentations. And please keep note again to attendees that if you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A and we will get to them at the conclusion of our presentations today. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev, for an introduction. Okay. Okay, so we are turning our screen and
thank you, Mr. Virchenko. Hello, dear participants and listeners. Thank you very much for joining this workshop. Today, our team will present to you some of the results of our nationwide research. We share our findings with you because as researchers who are at the epicenter of this terrible and bloody war, we understand the scale of the problem of Ukrainian students' mental health. And also, we are fully aware that such complicated issues cannot be resolved alone. Only through international scientific dialogue, only through cooperation with solidarity and a partnership. So here we go, mental health of university students during and after the war, the battle for Ukrainian future. And we realize it is difficult enough to follow the Ukrainian agenda for the third year in a row, if you are not Ukrainian, and especially if you are from another continent. So we decided to give you more context today so that we can better understand the scale of a problem. On this slide, you may see three introductory points. Point number one, Ukraine became a sovereign state after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. And during first decades of independence, we had a noticeable Soviet heritage, including in medicine and mental health care system. Probably many of you have heard about punitive psychiatry in the USSR, about the strong stigmatization of society in matters of mental well-being in the post-Soviet space. Anyway, throughout our independence, Ukraine has a clear pro-European vector of development, and over the time, this trend has intensified. intensified. Point two, until 2014, we were the largest European country by area. It's approximately 6% of mainland Europe. Mr. Virchenko, previous slide, please. Yeah. And point number three, as of 2014, the population of Ukraine was 45 million people. This is almost 10% of European Union's total population in the same year. But the war came in 2014 and changed everything. Next slide, please. Thank you. On this slide, you may see quantified human and territorial losses in both stages of the war, hybrid and full scale. It should be noted that only the percentage of occupied territories is accurate data here, but estimates of human losses are very approximate. As of today, 109,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory has been captured by Russia. By the way, two of us, exactly Mrs. Pinchuk and I, we are from the Donetsk region, the eastern part of Ukraine, which has been occupied since 2014. What does it mean? It means that we have been living in the status of an internally displaced person already for 10 years, and also that means that we have met the war twice. In the first time in 2014 and later in 2022. And at this slide, the number of killed and injured Ukrainians is the United Nations estimate. It is very conservative assessment and maybe several times lower than the real amount. Also, the Ukrainian side, Ukrainian government is most likely underestimating the real number of Ukrainian troops losses as a part of the information war. We also understand it. But nevertheless, it is all hundreds of thousands of victims in the 21st century in the center of Europe, and it's a huge tragedy. Next slide, please. And some terrible consequences, hundreds of thousands of destroyed houses, approximately 10 million internally displaced people and refugees, and these are only officially registered people. And the most shocking statistics, personally for me, 700,000 Ukrainian children deported to Russia. And this data is confirmed by both Ukrainian sources and official Russian ones. In other words, these are millions of destroyed biographies and divided families, a huge humanitarian disaster and catastrophe. Next slide. Thank you. And how did the war affect Ukrainian youth? First of all, the total population has decreased significantly because of the war. It is almost impossible to assess accurately in such circumstances of intensive military actions, but according to positive scenario, about 36 million people live in Ukraine as of 2023. And according to our calculations, the share of the population aged 17-24 is no more than 7%. That's less than 3 million people. On the right side of the slide, you can see the demographic pyramid of Ukraine, current for 2023. Regardless of the war, in the past, during first decade after declaration of Ukrainian independence, there was a rapid decline in the birth rate, and we have a demographic hole in this segment. And before today's workshop, I managed to compare these pyramids with the pyramids for the United States of America, for Canada, Australia, France, Italy, and many other countries. And everywhere, the demographic breakdown is much more balanced than in Ukraine. The student age segment in Ukraine is critically small, and this is how it happened historically. And this doesn't take into account those young people who left the country and died during the war. So we understand that post-war recovery, post-war reconstruction, renovation, and tax burden will fall on the shoulders of this small group of people. The education system also suffers a lot in terms of infrastructure. About 4,000 educational institutions have been damaged since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. 365 institutions were completely destroyed. At the same time, only 2/3 of total amount of educational institutions have shelters. That means that a third of all Ukrainian schools, all the colleges and universities are unable to ensure the safety of their students during air raids. Next slide, please. Thank you. Air raid alarms force students and lecturers to hide in the subway in order to continue the educational process. But unfortunately, subway isn't always next to university building, and there is no subway in most Ukrainian regions. So during the war, having a subway nearby is almost a luxury. Next slide, please. Over the past 2 years, there have been a lot of life-affirming actions and performances by young people. Young people demonstrate in every possible way their unbrokenness and resistance. And they show that war cannot disrupt their plans, such as celebrating the graduation, for example. Students struggle to maintain their present their routine, such as continuing studying, passing exams, and defending their diplomas, thesis, etc., even if it didn't bring much pleasure before the war. An interesting fact about this guy, this student in photo, he is a hero. In fact, he's a soldier. He defends his country and at the same time honestly defends his diploma paper. But the attitude towards him as a student is impartial. And finally, he received a B grade for this paper, not A grade. Next slide, yes. The resilience of lecturers and teachers is also amazing. For example, here a university professor joins a video conference from the trench just to give a lecture to his students. And the school teacher on the right came to the ruins of the school to find documents on which her students' admission to universities depends a lot. Yes, but there is also another tragic side. It's not a period about resistance and resilience, but about tragedy when students give their lives at the front line or become random victims of Russian missile hits. In this photo, students gathered to say goodbye to their colleague, an 18-year-old boy, Ivan Rubitva, who voluntarily went to the front line and never returned. This exhibition is dedicated to those Ukrainian students who will never receive their diplomas. They sought to get a high education and could become scientists, teachers, doctors, lawyers, architects, and make this world a better place. But the Russian soldiers, the Russian policymakers interrupted their lives. This is damage to the buildings of our alma mater, Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. At the top left is the auditorium of the Faculty of Philology. Below is a sports complex for students. At the top right is the building of the Faculty of Biology of our university, and below is a strike exactly on the center of Kyiv, next to our main building. It was just a weekday, it was an early morning, and students were rushing to lectures and seminars. This sunny girl is a student of the Faculty of Mathematics of our university. Her name is Yulia Zdanovska. She was extremely talented girl and promising student, but she was killed by a Russian missile in the early days of the war. Now the street where our student campus is located, as well as the Institute of Psychiatry where the bulk of our team works, is named after Yulia. And in total, more than 90 staff and students of our Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv were killed by Russians. Thus, students are small and very vulnerable group, but at the same time, a very important group and even crucial for the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine and for the revitalization of national economy. Therefore, the Ukrainian state, represented by the National Research Foundation, has prioritized the study of students' mental health and initiated a project called Innovative Model of Mental Health Protection of Students During and After the War. Our research team won the grant and has been running this project. And that's our team. It consists of 8 people. That's interesting that there is close interdisciplinary interaction here, as the team includes psychiatrists, psychologists, economists, and a lawyer. And the last my slide, the research includes two significant big parts. The first one is the collection of primary data through survey conduction and focus groups. And the second one is the development of the model for Ukrainian students' mental health protection. And here I finish my part. I thank you very much for your attention, and let me give the floor to our next speaker, our project supervisor, Professor Irina Pinchuk. Thank you.
Thank you, Violetta. Good morning, all participants in this event. It's not easy to present after the speech Violetta, after her slide, but we have to live and work for our victory, for the future Ukraine. Thank you very much for invite to participate in this session of Global Speaker Series. It is pleasure to share with you information about the situation in Ukraine. I would like to continue some words about our presentation. The design of our study involved two student surveys. The first pilot was conducted at the beginning of the war, 3 months after its start, and 1,142 students were interviewed. And the second main survey was conducted 19 months later, 1 year and a half after the start of the war, and 2,364 students took part in this survey. All participants signed the informed consent and agreed to be included in the study. Socio-demographic part of the survey include, thank you, this slide, the first. Socio-demographic part of the survey included questions about the age, gender, year of the study, relocation experience, and seeking support before and after the full-scale invasion. All participants were asked to measure their psychological well-being on the 0-10 scale before and also after full-scale war. Our goal was to screen for symptoms, not for mental condition, screen for symptoms of depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, sleep disorders, substance use, and suicidality. And we use the screening test. We also conduct 3 focus group meetings with students of different courses regarding their needs for psychological assistance and other intervention in connection with mental health problem. The next slide, please. Our study demonstrated increased level of symptoms of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorders, both in the pilot and in the main studies. In the 2023, you can see that the number of students with the symptoms of anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorders decreased, but the number with the symptoms of depression increased. We explain the decrease in the symptoms of anxiety disorders and PTSD that were present in the first 3 months of the war by adaptation to a stressful situation. The next slide. The situation is different with the depressive symptoms. You can see on this slide that in the 2023, this is the secondary survey, the severe and moderately severe symptoms of depression more than the data of severe and moderately severe depression in 2022. 28% in 2022 and 33% in 2023. Another situation with the next slide, please. With the symptoms of anxiety against the general background of the decrease in anxiety symptoms, we see an increase in the number of the students with a minimal symptoms in 2023. Very important for us was the next slide, please. The survey, the risk of the suicidal behavioral. We asked 5 questions and we received the following result. 37% felt that life was not worth living. 35% wished to die. 43% students thought about suicide, even if they would never do it. And the next slide, please. No, previously, please, previously. Very important, the last 2 point, 20% students seriously considered the possibility of suicide or made plans on how to do it, and 7% attempt suicide. And now we know that 27% of our students have a higher risk of suicidal behavior. The next slide. 39% of students in the first study and 45% in the second study looked for help from their relatives and friends. Up to 15% of students in both surveys responded that they consult specialists during the war regarding their medical conditions. And 16% of students who had not previously asked for help are trying to seek it now in the period of the survey. The next slide. Low level of help seeking in the context of very low self-estimate of mental health. Only 11% of students are satisfied with their mental state. 65% have poor level of satisfaction, and 24% a moderate level of satisfaction. Next slide, please. Let me now say a few words about the analytical study that was conducted in August 2023 for the summit of First Lady and Gentlemen. This summit took place in Kyiv, and this summit has a topic mental health, and this topic a first time in the history, maybe in the world, because the First Lady and Gentlemen discussed about the mental health. This research was conducted in 11 countries, not in Canada. Mental health is one of top 5 global challenges. For young people, mental health is a bigger challenge than for other age groups, in a second place after inflation. Factors that more affect the mental health of Ukrainian are war, political decision in our own country, watching, listening to news, loss of job, political decision in other countries, and it's very important for us. The next slide. Young people age 18, 24 have the lowest mental health indicators. 56% feel stressed, 53% feeling down, and 45% exhaustion. Next slide. Young people age 13, 24 avoid taking about mental health with specialists because it's embarrassing, don't want to disturb friends or family, and maybe affect their ability to get or stay in a job. This my final slide, the key points of this analytical survey. Young people age 18, 40, 24 self-report the lowest mental health ratings. They desire advanced mental health education, but feel more uncomfortable communicate to a mental health professional. They perceive people with mental health condition more positively, and they see mental health as a greater challenge in the next 5 years. Young people need psychoeducation and support. They believe most in interacting with other people, sport, hobbies, and travel. Thank you very much for attention. Here I stop and I hand over to my colleague, Dr. Volodymyr, to continue the presentation.
Thank you. I will continue, and I begin the last part in our presentation that will be followed with conclusion, and then there will be a Q&A session. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Sanjeev for presenting me to the audience, and I thank Christine Cleverly for inviting us to share the result of our research. So, an important part of our research project was an analysis of the traumatic experience of Ukrainian students. And we received a quite interesting and at the same time challenging results. It should be noted that in pilot study, a major share of students that reported a traumatic experience was 67.3%. But in 2023, the share increased to 78.1%. And it demonstrates this threatening trend in the mental state and mental conditions of Ukrainian students. It should be noted that one of the most frequently reported traumatic events in the pilot study, it was a death of a loved one, because the war in Ukraine lead to the massive humanitarian catastrophe, and we experiencing the death of our friends. Sometimes it could be relatives or peers. Also, it should be noted that one of the most frequently reported event was a direct exposure to shelling and bombing, because every day And in my city too, in Kyiv, which is the capital of Ukraine, almost every day we have air raid alerts, and sometimes it could be every day or one time per week, but we experiencing missile strikes on our cities. So that's why it's become one of the most traumatic and most dangerous events for Ukrainian student. Talking about main study, it should be noted that the overall picture is changed a little bit, because we see that a lot of students that participate in the survey, they reported that they having property losses or damages, they being under occupation. It's 100 students reported that they was under occupation, and it's surprising. It's good that they could cope with that and live with this traumatic experience, because it's very hard for Ukrainian student. Also, 635 students reported that they experienced the death of a loved one. It's bigger than during the pilot study. And also, I want to underline that more than 200 students reported that they seen someone killed or injured, and it's become a traumatic experience for them. So therefore, we see the negative changes in condition where every Ukrainian student try to study and live and try to continue their study in the university in such a hard period for Ukraine. Another important part in our survey was analysis of the usage or utilization of mental health services by Ukrainian students. I want to draw your attention to the fact that from 100% of respondents, only 15% of respondents tell that they use mental health services. And at this figure or diagram, you could see the distribution of these respondents between different categories. But when we talk about 69% that visiting psychologist here, it's 69% from 15% of respondents. So as we see, it's not so big share, and it demonstrates that due to some reason, Ukrainian student didn't use a mental health services as we expect. Also, we find out from the result of our research that 35% from 50% of respondents they using a medication prescribed by doctor, 31% visiting a psychotherapist, and a little less, it's 24% visiting a psychiatrist. And as I think it's demonstrate a tendency that Ukrainian student, due to some reason, they didn't want or they have no ability to visit the doctor, the healthcare professional, or maybe they don't want to talk about their mental health problem with healthcare professional. They don't want to share an information, and they don't want to talk about symptoms. So there could be a different reason, and we will study this reason in the next stage of our research. One of the key elements in our research was analysis of the impact of mental health on academic productivity of the student. And we receive an interesting and surprising result. First of all, I want to note that we use a research instrument. It was a WPAI questionnaire. It was designed by Margaret Riley in 1993, and we adapt this questionnaire for our purpose because original questionnaire were devoted to analysis of the work productivity and activity impairment. Instead of work productivity, we study an academic productivity and activity impairment. And the key question of our survey was, during the past 14 days, how much did your mental health problem affect your academic productivity and your ability to do your regular daily activities? So we collect this data, we analyze them, and we analyze and we receive the following results. Our key finding is that more than 50% of students reported a negative but moderate negative impact of mental health problem on their academic performance. The negative impact of mental health problem on academic performance was greater than on the regular daily activities, and I think this result was predictable. But what is more interesting that we observe a moderate negative rather than severe negative. So this negative impact is moderate, and as Dr. Irina Pinchuk already mentioned it previously, we think that it is due to students' adaptation to the impact of the stress factor, because Ukrainian students, they live in this condition during the past 2 years, and they adapt to this situation. During our research, we conducted 3 focus groups, as Dr. Irina Pinchuk noted, and at this focus group, we collect the opinion of the student regarding the initiative that should help to protect the student mental health at the university level in Ukraine. Ukrainian students reported that dissemination of information about mental health and importance of protection of mental health, engaging opinion leader to promote mental health support services, open psychological club and self-help group should help students to support and to protect their mental health during the war in Ukraine. So they think that this initiative will be extremely useful, and it become a basis for developing a policy implication at the next stage of our research. And it allows us to define the need of Ukrainian university toward protection of student mental health during the war. First of all, we need to raise an awareness of the important role of student mental health in ensuring their academic performance. We should talk about it a little bit more in every Ukrainian university. Also, we should apply an effective screening method for the timely detection of mental disorders among students. We should implement modern prevention tools using digital technology, and also we need to implement an innovative mental health intervention, including digital one, adapted to the need of Ukrainian university students. And let me draw some conclusion regarding our presentation. The first conclusion is that every Ukrainian, and I think that policymaker in Ukraine, everyone should understand that student as a future professional, they become one of the most valuable human resource of Ukraine in the context of the post-war, reconstruction. Also, it should be noted that negative changes in the mental health status of Ukrainian students identified during the study turn the protection of the student mental health in one of the key priority of the public policy in Ukraine. And it was reflected in the speeches of the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska. And analysis that we conduct within our research allow us to come to the conclusion that Ukraine should be open for cooperation and need an external assistance from the global community to protect student mental health, because only expanded cooperation with international stakeholders enable the implementation of the modern method and tools for screening, prevention, and treatment of student mental health in Ukraine, which will help us to preserve Ukrainian human capital during the large-scale humanitarian catastrophe which was caused by the full-scale war in Ukraine. And the last slide of our presentation shows a high school student from Ukrainian cities. It's Chernihiv, and they come to their high school that was destroyed by the missile strike, and it demonstrates that Ukrainian youth, Ukrainian students, they believe in the future of Ukraine. They think that Ukraine are able to win this war with the help of international community. And I think that one of the most optimistic signs that despite a list of stress factors, despite the risk and negative changes in the socioeconomic socioeconomic area in Ukraine, our students, they stay in Ukraine. Only 30% of students leave the Ukraine. The 70%, they stay here, they continue their study, and I hope that this student become a core for Ukrainian post-war reconstruction. Thank you for an attention.
Thank you, Volodymyr, and thank you, Dr. Pinchuk and Violetta, for some very thoughtful and excellent presentations, really highlighting the impact, tragedy, resilience, and efforts, collective efforts to address student mental health during the war in Ukraine. And so thank you for this presentation. I would like to open it up for questions. We do have a few minutes for questions, and we'll ask Volodymyr, Violetta, and Dr. Pinchuk to answer the questions as they come up. We do have one in the chat already, and again, please use the Q&A and not the chat, but the Q&A function to submit your questions. And Dr. Pinchuk, I saw you already answered somewhat, but I do think it's an important question. And Kathy asks about the to better understand the cultural stigmas that already existed in the Ukraine about accessing mental health supports, and how that might factor in students accessing mental health supports currently. And I'll add my own additional question to this, which is, has it changed over the course of kind of the last 2 years as well, and people's dialogue about mental health and also receptiveness to access mental health services?
Thank you for the question. This is very interesting, important for us questions. I started to respond, and I think about the Soviet heritage, the system of isolation, the system of punishment, and we have a lot of we emphasize in our system on inpatient department. We have a community mental health system in Ukraine, and we haven't the psychological service in the university. And our survey, our study, we think after our survey, we think about the organized system prevention and recovery mental health for students student in the university in our country. We try to implement the different evidence-based model in the educational program for students. The evidence-based model for post-degree education for faculty members, a serious webinar training, educational program for students and for the faculty teachers. And we think about the implemented the evidence-based program management, stress management. We now translate it into to Ukrainian and think implemented to the university in our country.
Thank you, Dr. Pinchuk. Any other questions that people would like to ask? Please do submit them. I will ask another question while we're waiting. Volodymyr, you alluded to this in your last slide, but there are tremendous efforts and remarkable efforts to understand the mental health impact on students in the Ukraine during this time. And my question to you is, what do you think are the opportunities internationally through these partnerships for us to learn from what you've learned during this critical time, and how this might be able to influence, foster greater collaborations with researchers and student mental health globally?
Thank you, Dr. Sanjeev, for this question. I want to know that this issue was also discussed at the Lancet Commission, because I'm as a member of Lancet Commission of the research group, we discuss it deeply. And I want to know that I think that for every Ukrainian researcher, one of the most important things that we could get from international collaboration is to be heard. We want to be heard and to speak about Ukraine, about our problem, about this catastrophe that we have here. And for Ukraine, when we have a negative changes in the economic area, we have a budget deficit and we have not enough funding. So that's why I think that every Ukrainian researcher of the mental health problem will be happy and will participate in the international proposal when international researcher will invite Ukrainian for writing grant proposal to publish an journal article, because it's extremely important. We could get wide dissemination of our research. And a good example was mentioned by Irina Pinchuk. We prepare a couple of publications about mental health of Ukrainian population during the war, and right now I see that increasing number of sightings of this article. So I think that one of the key assistance for Ukrainian researcher will be to make an access to the international peer-reviewed journal simple for Ukrainian researcher, because sometimes we have not enough funding. Sometimes we have a problem with recognition, because sometimes Ukrainian researcher, no one know about them. And I think that when this international cooperation will help us to share and disseminate an information about Ukraine, about mental health research, about the mental state of Ukrainian population, it will be a great benefit for every Ukrainian. And also we shouldn't forget about such an important thing as networking, because networking, even this event, it's a great opportunity for us. So that's why once again we are thanking University of Toronto for this opportunity to share a result of our research. And I'm proud to be a member of this team together with Dr. Irina, with Violetta.
Yeah, wonderful. And I would like to say that I think that is that last opportunity for collaboration to learn from you and your team is a tremendous opportunity and why these events are so important together. Violetta, we didn't get a chance to get to you, but we're wrapping up. But I do see that each of you have left your contact information to the attendees, which I think will be extremely valuable. I do hope this dialogue continues, and I know it will continue beyond this this webinar. And I just want to say you really have illustrated bringing to life the tragedy, trauma, and mental health distress, but also the opportunities to learn and to support students during this critical time in the Ukraine. And I'm really struck by how impactful that longitudinal data is to inform your service delivery and supports. And thank you for doing this really important work and for sharing this with us today. So again, thank you on behalf of the attendees and the organizing group here today. I'll hand it over to Dr. Kristen Clevery for closing remarks.
I echo Sanjeev's thank you. It was illuminating, some of which I knew, and which is why I was really wanting to have the opportunity for you to present to our community. I do want to let everyone know the recording will be available right after. And the next session will be in May, and we will send out information on that. If you would like to join our mailing list, please do sign up. Emma has put the link, and we will be sending out an attendees feedback form, which is really important. So please do take the time to fill that out. So just to close up, thank you to all of our speakers. We are just starting our partnership with this team, and we look forward to future opportunities. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.